All right. Give me a second. I think we can get started. Thanks for coming. I'm really happy, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. And today we're going to talk about something that's not on my screen. Learning JavaScript. So this session was more thought about as not an introduction to the language. I think we all assume that you know at least a little bit, right? Like you've played with the basics and you kind of know how to use it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laurie and Kevin. Yeah, no, sorry. You two, I don't know what you assume people bring to the table, right? So some basic JavaScript knowledge, but what we're going to talk about is, well, first, who is going to talk? I'm very and then Kevin is gonna, back there, is gonna pick up and give you some, pick up some of the lessons learned, give you some resources where you can find and learn more. And he's also going to talk about how to use them correctly, because that's sometimes actually not as easy as it looks. It's just reading. I'm David, and we're at Assembly. They have some fantastic PA that also makes it possible for us to record all this online. If you follow the YYCJS group, you will see all the recordings from last year, January, to this one, except for last month, because we had internet problems. We were about as many people as this time, maybe a little less. So what I'm asking you is, if you don't need to, please don't connect to the guest network, because yes, we think it might have had something to do with it. So if you could, only connect to the guest network if you really have to. If you can tether or don't need it, let's try and use it as little as possible, just so that our Hangout keeps streaming. We sometimes have issues with it, like cutting out and stuff. Speaking of the Hangout, we have Red Deer joining us. Jim, do you want to say something? I think we can hear you when you unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, so we've got a few people in the office today, but we just do a monthly meetup, a little more general, and except it's usually me presenting, which is almost always JavaScript topics. So it makes sense for us to listen in on you guys. So thanks for having us today.
Thanks a bunch for joining us. Awesome. I was really happy. So I'm, yeah, about the support, and then, you know, all of you guys coming out, people watching it online. It's really great to see that, you know, there's the interest and we can keep it going like this. So, some more housekeeping. There is no beer today. If you came for the free beer, you can leave now. I love you guys, but my bank account doesn't, and we don't have anybody who would jump in as a sponsor. Eric is working on sponsorship packages right now, so if you want to make us developers and the community happy, buy some programmers pizza, buy some programmers beer, drinks, get your name on a t-shirt, talk to us. We have a couple of ideas how we can make this better for everybody, and also get some awesome swag. I think it's about time. It's been 4 years ago. We need some t-shirts. So if you or your company want to support us, go talk to us, talk to me after this, send us an email. And unfortunately, there isn't too many, but there's a couple of water bottles and pop over there, so feel free to grab some as long as supplies last. I'm sorry about that. hopefully next month we have it all figured out. But Eric decided to go to Hawaii before. So last month we talked about, I was really happy about doing that one about artificial intelligence. Talked about some general things and also teaching like how to teach JavaScript neural network, which actually turned out easier than we thought it is. And now I have the hammer that everything looks like a nail. I want to beat every problem with, hey, I could teach this neural network to solve this problem. And Kevin also talked about ES6, which is the next version of JavaScript. So basically, in reality, what we should be using right now. He made some awesome introduction videos. We posted them on Twitter, Google+, and in the meetup. There's more videos coming. So they turned out really well. If you want to learn more about it, and you should, because that's how things are going to look in JavaScript in the future. Next month, I have no idea. Probably Node.js more, because we're doing full stack stuff already. And I also want to maybe talk about setting up because people are very interested in how do I structure a bigger project, right? It's good getting started, but once you get at a certain size, what are the best practices and how do you keep it solid and maintainable and all those things? Might be talking about how you should run your projects like any other open source project and what the best practices are in getting an open source project in JavaScript up and running. I think that's it for me. So, Laurie, you're up next. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your experience with us. And I didn't forget anything.
That's okay. Good. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I think. Can you hear me? Good. So we just have to get my presentation up. And
I'm going to give you the
mic?
Yeah, no, the thing. And then I'm going to actually, I'm just going to flip this around so that Reddy can see us.
Here's the plug for this. On my.
Oh, here. Oh, technology.
Not working. There we are. Okay, now.
I think someone dropped out the Hangout.
Oh, sorry.
That's not your fault. Sorry, we're going to quickly solve some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Probably with Kevin helping me.
Kevin, we need you. That's all good. I can put it over here.
I think you dropped out of the Hangout.
Okay, so I'll just click on that link again.
And then find my presentation for me.
So minimize this.
We're on the Hangout. Good.
That's how it works. I'm going to send you the video about a conference. We're going to watch that in a break, a conference call in real life. It's pretty funny and pretty true. Red Deer, can you see the screen?
Here we are. Just put on presentation.
Awesome.
So I think you have to share screen here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. We got it soon. Share screen.
And then this is the presentation.
And then
here. And then she can just start it. View. Present.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Okay, guys. I'm excited to be here. Very excited to be here. I'm going to share my journey about learning code. Just a little bit about me. I'm coming from zero to kind of going full stack. I first learned just even how to do a static website by having my own website done by my daughter, who had her own web design firm. Through a WordPress blocked me with a front flat, just a static website. And within a week, I was like, well, how do you change this? So she was like, here's a book on HTML. and we went from there. Over time, I've worked on a lot of projects. I've been in the project management business, and I've worked on a lot of digital projects. And I tended to get more and more excited about things online. and really wanted to get into it. So as a consultant, I just stopped and said, I'm going to learn JavaScript. So what we started is, and what I want to do before we get going is I want to share the quest. These are my goals. I was going to keep them secret, but these are I thought I'd share what I would like to see come out of this today. So I want you to share my quest with me. I want to give you some lessons learned, because I've got a lot of them, and they're going to be some funny ones. And if you guys are, who in here is about to go on a journey to learn code or is in the process, thinking seriously? Hey, so I'm not alone, okay? I want to share a bit of my project, of what I'm working on. I want to give you a perspective on Node.js, because that's the poison I chose to get into. I want to give you a bit about what it's like to learn back-end instead of learning simple front-end. I'm going to give you a bit of a comparison and some of the stories and some of the funny tales that I experienced and what not to do, so you don't repeat some of the things. I also like to encourage us to get the community going. This is a first start. These guys have done great. I mean, hats off. I think we have a budding group of people, and I encourage us to work together and code with a friend. See some future projects. I think they start with little ideas, and if you do nothing more than think about action, then we've succeeded. So why did I want to learn code? Because really I think that you can get lost in the crowd with a standard website, and I think dynamic websites are fun. I think the world is coming to the point where we need to interact with each other through our websites. So just having a brochure to me didn't cut it. So that's where I started, and I thought it seemed pretty straightforward. At the time, I went and bought a book and got signed up on a few things, got my computer, got my Mac Pro here, ready to go. So I thought I'd start on a quest to learn, well, of all things, JavaScript. Seemed straightforward. If I had a dime for everybody that told me to learn JavaScript, I would have been rich. So I went on and I started with Treehouse, and I really recommend Treehouse. Has anybody heard of them? They're very good. If you're going to do some if you're going to start from zero to websites, they're the best. They're friendly, they're easy to follow, they're humorous, and I find them very good. But that wasn't enough. After I got into JavaScript, I felt like I didn't really know enough about my Treehouse was good for HTML, CSS, but I felt I needed a little bit more reinforcement. So I got into Code Academy, and they talk more about projects and how to apply things. So I was getting pretty excited there. But it wasn't enough, so I decided to take up a few tuts plus YouTube stuff and read a few blogs. And well, that wasn't enough, so I got into a book and an Udemy, and I just kept going. And well, pretty soon I started to learn, you got to learn the good parts, and I started following all sorts of blogs and videos, and well, by the time I got in with these guys and started downloading a few books, I knew I was on a dangerous trail. So at this point, I started realizing, hey, I'm learning, but this is like teaching me, I'm confused. So what I found is the more courses I took, the more confused I got, and more of a feeling of, man, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I think this is crazy. So as the number of courses came up higher, I found that the more I was doing silly things to myself. I was sitting at my computer working away, studying, but at the same time stressing myself out and telling myself bad things. So my first set of lessons that I'll share with you is always, always have a goal in mind. Don't just take the courses. Get in, sit down, figure out the whys. I had the whys. I wanted to do something interactive, but I was so focused on the courses that I wasn't focused on trying to do anything. So I say apply what you learn as quickly as possible. Take something, try it. Even if you don't do well, try it, look it up, try again. Things will not, and if you're on the right track, I will actually argue if they make sense, you're probably not on the right, you're not reading the right stuff. So things will not make sense. If they don't make sense, you're on the right track. Also, success comes when you ask for more questions. Oh, I forgot to start my timer. I'm going to do that so we don't get yak in here. I'm going to keep that going. Anyways, success will come with more questions. And I put quest in here because what happens is you end up asking yourself more questions. So rather than, how do I do a website with, how do I use Node, to how can I interact with a 2-page site with a blog in the back, and how do I create a new URL with a button? You know, you're more specific. So Google lots and lots and lots. Play with CodePen. Has anybody heard of CodePen? If you Google CodePen, you can basically have a 3-page thing where you can see the site as you're coding. So you can put your HTML in, your JavaScript, your CSS, and you can see the changes. Also, other people share their projects, and you'll often see a CodePen link. Make friends with your terminal. Who here is using their terminal? Yeah, fair bit. Red Deer? Is anybody gonna? Can they say a show of hands, or is there anybody in there using? They're all using. Red Deer's ahead of us. Make friends. The first time I had to use my terminal, I was like, ugh. And you know what? This is so fun. This is a true story. I had a MacBook Pro with a Snow Leopard version on it. The darn thing did not come with a terminal. And I went online and I found out that some of the retailers take the terminal off for consumers because they didn't want to mess them up. So I actually had to reload my software to get my terminal going. And then when I went on to my first course, my versions were wrong because I ended up using my CD. And long story short, because I was trying to use my terminal, I ended up having to rebuild my Mac. So I got to be friends with my Mac pretty quickly. But your terminal is your friend. So I revisited my goals very quickly. My goals became to build a website with JavaScript. It must be interactive. I wanted visitors to put stuff in it, and I wanted to be able to come back later, i.e. persistence. So that meant a database. It should be friendly, too. So I had this little quest of all these back-end apps are so ugly. So I wanted to have something that was fun, usable, but also at the same time interactive. So that was my quest with Node.js. So here was my first little landing page I made up. And it was not on Node. It was just it's a video. I've got it just on screen here. There's a video, and I thought, well, my goal was to make something that we could share some projects with independent coders. So I thought, I want to make those buttons active, and I want to open up an app. So that was my start, just to get me going. So what did I have here? I wanted a Node app that lets me create something, a project, and work on it with people and things. So I wanted to see something. That was my big, fluffy start. So I was determined to learn Node.js. Here was my first book that I brought home. Here, Chris, you remember? And it was Learn Node.js in 24 hours. Well, go figure. I got it at the Chapters bookstore. Well, lesson number 1. Yeah, I got a whole Hello World app up. I was really excited. I even tweeted to my kids, and they thought, that's pretty cool. Then confusion. What I didn't know was the different versions of Express. So Node is changing so quickly. It's not yet version 1. So I learned at that point, I was starting this in I think, September. And I did not purchase or review or visit any blogs that were dated anything earlier than July of 2014 because I knew I would be confused because what I had was is Express version 4. But the books were written on Express version 3. Even the start command was different. So I couldn't use app.js like the books. So I got to chapter 3 of 15 and it wouldn't work. So of course I thought I was an idiot and went around and asked people for help. And it wasn't too long when I learned that the community was also feeling stress with version 4 versus version 3. The other thing is there's frameworks. There's not just Node in here. There's frameworks that sit in Node. And so just like Rails, it expresses the Rails for Node. There's middleware that comes with each load. That middleware changes each time. There's the app.js command versus the debug command. And there's the model view controller concept. So these were all things that were way beyond what I thought I was learning. So that's the first little insight that created what I call, and this is the worst thing, and if there's one more thing I want you to walk away with is avoid the seed of doubt. And that hit me real hard after, am I good enough? I've been spending months doing this, and I don't even have a product, and I don't get it, and I'm confused, and I'm just, what the heck? So I started asking myself, what am I dreaming? I should be working. I am poor. I'm a social reject. What's wrong with me? I don't know what I've got to show. So it was the seed of doubt. So I said, why did I want to learn code anyway? I was failing at everything. So it felt, again, Another symptom that you're progressing ahead. I came to meetups like this and I told the guys and they went, yep, you're learning. And so it was funny. So what do you do with this? You turn it around. So I said to myself, nah, dreaming creates. Dollars come from people who really like your stuff. So again, learn. Everything to show for yourself when you learn. Challenge the status quo. So back to carry on. Make this fun. So I found this little, see if I can get it going. I found this, I thought, let's just get to think like a coder. So what we have here is this little code game. And he just basically teaches you to think one step at a time. So this is like a step, which could be turned into a loop. It doesn't have any sound. It's okay. So it's CodeBot. So if anybody wants to learn to think like a coder, download CodeBot. It's free for the 1-hour game. It's really cheap for a longer one. And it's hilarious. There's YouTube solutions and the whole bit. And so I played that at bedtime. And it made me started to think, hey, this is kind of fun. So let me get out of this. So the learning trajectory, I need to share this. This is very important. When you first start a new goal, I want you to think about a child that grows up. A guy, my son would be perfect. They need to learn their driver's license. They start off at the new goal. They're excited. They've got a vision in mind. They're a little restless because they can't drive. It's getting irritating. They can't go on dates. They're not cool. So they take up driving. Then they learn that they don't know so much, and they go through the, oh my God, the W2F stage. I'll let you fill in that blank. And then they get into what's called a cautious awareness or cautious competence. Oh, am I standing in front here? I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that. Here, is that better? Okay, so then they get back to normal and all is good again. So when I look at this in my journey, I see the first time I got my Sublime editor, I was so happy. Another recommendation, Sublime editor, great for starting up. Also my console, I was friends with it now. It wasn't frightening me, it worked. Treehouse worked, YouTube worked. I was really on a roll, ready to rock and roll. Then I got to DigitalOcean support. My first ticket where I couldn't get things up, they said, check your logs. You need to have your ensuite ready, and you haven't paired this right. And I'm like, huh? I just want to know what to do. And I wanted them to point me to a tutorial, but I was talking to developer, helping developer. Directories, I had no idea where to put stuff. I was in that crazy stage. Then I started to learn break things on purpose. And I'm starting to think that the reason there's more guys in the coding in the back end is because they like to break things. I'm convinced. Whereas when I broke something, it was like, oh no, now I broke it. It's going to take me 18,000 years to get it back, and I'm going to be dumb again. No, you're supposed to break it. That's how you figure things out. Learn keywords. So when I learned something and I couldn't get it right, I Googled the most ridiculous things. But you know what? A keyword came up. Oh, persistence. You mean keeping data isn't really going to get me anywhere, but I see persistent data. Oh, that's a new keyword, etc., etc. So you learn the keywords, then you Google better. Then you get on OpenStack and GitHub and things. And you ask friends, and they're more interested in helping you. My console became my friend, and so on. So then back to normal, where we're experimenting and we're breaking and fixing, and that becomes the game. So this is important. So I want to compare an index to a simple static site. This you may know. This is what I took off of I think it was a boilerplate HTML5. You look and there's all of your header with your references to your CSS and your style sheets. And I want to compare that to an index with Node Express. See, there's nothing there. So you can see the confusion. It's like, okay. So when you're trying to write something in Node, it's not the same. There are many documents. So I compared Node to, this is a standard, the violin would be a standard static site. And it can be beautiful, and it can say all sorts of things, and it can have its own message, and it can be a lot of work, and it is a lot of detail. But taking that towards the Node.js environment, and you're talking about frameworks that work together, that are balanced, that are rooted, that have files, that have client files and server files and data, and they move together. So if you take that leap, it's a rather big one. So learning that is one of the first steps. Packages are loaded with Express. So I took the packages that were loaded and I thought, why am I so confused? Then I looked at what comes with it and I said, okay, more keywords here. So we have Express, which is our framework. We have Morgan, which logs requests. Ah, there's requests that come in and out. I have to learn that. There's a cookie parser. I didn't know much about cookies. That's front-end stuff, but this thing is doing it automatically. There's the body parser, and then there's the templates. And Jade is a whole new language of HTML, but it's friendly with nodes. So there are all sorts of things to learn. But again, balancing the keywords with what you're trying to do. So making it many projects. So when I talked about that HTML file looking a little blank, well, that's because we have your HTML, the header coming in with the index and the Jade. So you can see where they're taking information off of each other. So you've got your doc type sitting here. You've got your index.js, which tells the roots, and then you've got your layout that tells you to pick up the information from these other files. And there's more than this, but this just gives you an example of how they kind of interact. And in a really positive way, because there's a layout and there's a JavaScript files which are used efficiently to support multiple files. But I'm not going to get too detailed. Bottom line is it makes a page that looks like this. If you loaded the standard Node.js off of your terminal and you booted up your browser, this is what you would see. So I did find that I had a lot to learn. Now that I knew all of these things, I said, well, I'm going to go back, and I did it again. I went back to code school. I even signed up for MongoDB University. I'm serious. There was a little online university, and I took it, and it said, Mongo University for people using Node. I was so excited until I got to the third lesson, and it said, please write a user interface on your Node page. and I stopped. I knew all sorts of things about MongoDB, but I had no idea to write it in code yet. So it was back to that again. There was a JavaScript summit that was online I think a month ago. I joined that. Most of it was pretty good, but again, lots of new keywords, not necessarily the solutions for me, but got me more familiar, gave me a bit of confidence because they weren't foreign anymore. I could understand them. So more things to take away. Back to the doldrums of the stress after learning so many things and starting to say, wait, where am I again? Second set of lessons. Never forget to have a goal in mind. Refine your goals. If you don't have a project to work on, you will not learn the back end. It's that simple. Keep at it 2 hours a day. This is the minimum. I sound sometimes it was way more, but the thing is, keep a beat. If you stop for 4 weeks or 4 months, you will have to go back and relearn. You'll forget things. Understand the JavaScript in the libraries. So when you first learn, there's lots of courses on JavaScript, but taking apart some jQuery or some of these node things and starting to look for the, oh, I see, that's the loops. Oh, I see, well, there has to be a variable here, it has to be closed, or it won't make sense here. You'll start to understand things. Then you'll go in and say, oh, I need to learn more about closures. I'm confused. What's that word this mean? And you'll start to see where it fits, but it's iterative. You first see the libraries, they won't make sense. You run say a node app, it won't make sense, but you go back into your JavaScript, it will make sense. So it's iterative. No one knows everything, even Douglas Crawford. You'll see that. If you test that, go around, even listen to them. They don't know everything. They're very good at certain things. They become the guru, but it is not a hierarchical system where you have these great geeks of the world that know everything. It's not like that. People know pieces. People know pieces, people know pieces, and they will help each other solve those pieces. There's not one teacher, so to speak, who will make you perfect. You will make yourself perfect by learning the puzzles as you go along. So build a small project, and I think Kevin's going to touch on this a little bit about how he found some projects and learned that way. Do not, if I haven't said this a dozen times, do not be afraid to break it and start all over. I have rebuilt my DigitalOcean droplets, I think 18 times now, from the stupidest thing, because I said to myself, well, I gotta learn, so I just toasted them and started again. I'm starting to realize that's not such a good idea. But focusing back on the interactive, look at little things. On the jQuery, I went back and learned that because jQuery is really good for getting you from learning JavaScript into the libraries. I was really excited, too, when I did some basic stuff to turn a light bulb on. with 2 images, you know, being able to toggle. That was exciting for me. So back to practicing, maybe putting it in CodePen, maybe take a page and try to do something with it that wasn't in there before, turn something off, do a pop-up message. I don't know, just play. Node likes these guys. So these were some more keywords for me. It was MongoDB and Mongoose. I learned that they're really cool with these guys. Passport. I learned this from some friends that were using it, and I thought, how do you get the authentication going? So they pointed me to Passport. Of course, I learned the hard way about Node Express. Well, the pros in my tutorials that I read continually talked about AngularJS. AngularJS is a high learning curve thing, but it's worth it. It's the front-end interactivity on the HTML page that lets you talk through Node and through MongoDB, so you can have data and you can what's called binding, so you can send data in and you can receive data back right in your HTML page. It's a lot to learn, but it's really worth thinking about. GitHub is a big friend. I think Kevin's going to allude to that. That was something you want to get really familiar with. Boy, did I learn that the hard way. You can deploy right in GitHub. I love GitHub. I'm learning it every day. I wish I'd learned it more. And you can meet people on GitHub, too. It's like your own little open source community. Grunt is another thing for deploying. It deploys all the front-end stuff. Bootstrap is, I know many of my designers hate Bootstrap, but I love because it gave me all of these ingredients. So the other friend that I had, and I've alluded to them, is DigitalOcean, and I'll tweet this out. This is one of those discount codes that I pulled off my server if you want to save a discount. If you choose to set up your own DigitalOcean, we're going to try to show you how to deploy one. It takes exactly 55 seconds, and you can load all of these frameworks on with that. Documentation, I'm only going to just run through this really quickly, because the important thing is when I wasn't finding my keywords and I was getting confused, I had to tell myself, look, there's documentation for this. Yes, I won't get it all, but if you walk through it, you'll answer some of the questions. So some of the questions I'm answering, I'm not answering yet, but I'm looking for answers to is, how do I take many pages that I have in Angular and create maybe a number of users or a number of projects, and that would be in some database with length, but I don't know how to build that, so I have to look in Mongoose. There's Angular questions, and you're going to learn a lot. Angular, I see here Angular and more Angular. There's a lot of JavaScript in Angular, and it's not so easy that you just go and learn a couple of lessons and then you're into Angular. It's, again, an uphill battle, but well worth learning. And lots of documentations in here. The documentation is Angular itself. There's documentation specific to using Bootstrap with Angular. And then there's the GitHub, there's little secrets in GitHub on there. And HTML boilerplate, you can download right from the HTML5 site, a boilerplate HTML page, so you don't have to do anything. It's all done for you. So lots of little cheats. A rendezvous back with my terminal, getting back into life and playing again, but again, it's a quest, so I don't know all of this stuff off by heart. So my new routine was back to YouTube. Whenever I got really confused, the type of learning style I have is I can only get so much out of a book. So what I found is when I got onto YouTube, I could see what they were doing, and I could see the directory they were going into, and I could see when they used the browser. Whereas in a book, I would be like, did he say this, and how do I find, so I could actually kind of show and tell and learn from that. So I found YouTube was really good, but balance. So my breaks every so often, because I was starting to sit at that computer and I know what it can do to your brain. So a little bit of a balance in order. My dog Taz gets me out every day. So she's and my other friend is WebStorm. WebStorm, is really good when you're getting into Angular. It's got the cheats when it comes to understanding JavaScript errors, and I don't think I would have gotten through my deploy on mean.js without WebStorm, because it points out a lot of things that maybe I couldn't see in Sublime. It also allows you to deploy right during your development. I haven't gotten to the point where I've got it working, you know, like a beat yet, but I look forward to it. So what did I need to get my head around? Well, these are the things that stumped me. The directory structure of the server and the client. And I know somebody put on the message board, how do you organize your JavaScript files? When you go into these modules and libraries, you will learn very quickly that based on your modules, you keep your JavaScript files consistent with them. And when I was doing my little app, I found myself deleting entire modules, and I was really happy I had all the code just within each module, so I could just remove it, or changing descriptions or changing content. Learning that models equals data, and there's work around that, and it's not as hard if you think of models as data, then it's not as hard to absorb. Controllers equals JavaScript, so when you get into this, there's JavaScript into the controllers, so understanding that, and understanding the views, the HTML and the CSS, it's still there, but it's in one area. Understanding canned CSS classes and how to work with Bootstrap. Understanding how Angular adds controllers in the HTML and how to match those HTML classes and tags to the right controllers and how it impacts things. That's where you can break things and have fun. So directory structure, for me, in my little project, I kind of narrowed it down to, in my app, I only had one file, and that was to change my model, and it was a really simple thing. I had one file to set up my little sandbox for my database, and then I focused on my node modules, which was my public controllers, directives, and services. These are big words. I'm not going to go into them today, but the point is that what looked like the universe could get modeled, could get narrowed down to 3 or 4 topics that I can now focus on. This is what my app looks like, and I'll give you, I've got it on the URL, so I'll give you a live demo in a sec here. But basically what I was trying to do here is, these are friends. I'm trying to create some projects, and each of them, I turn them blue when I think I have a, yeah, so that would be an edit or an ad. So by selecting this, I would change them to blue. And then I have these little drop downs, and I have data, and guess what? When I save it, it comes back the next day. So this is just a simple little model that I was playing with. And same sort of thing. So pick a date for a milestone, and if it's an achievement, it turns to a different color. Same thing with a roadblock. You know, again, finding a question. My questions became roadblocks. I can't figure out how to do, here it is. And then a Sherpa would be a mentor or an assistant of some sort. Somebody to maybe test what you're doing, pretend they're your customer. So just made up some stuff. Again, I came around to some new goals after this, and I learned very much. And one of the big things that I learned, and I would like you to learn from me, so you don't do it again, don't be afraid to ask for help. And think of this as solving puzzles. Publish fast. Don't be afraid to put stuff out there. There's nothing sillier than doing something and not trying to get it out there. Even if it's what you think is garbage, you can show people. Use GitHub. So now I'm asking myself some specific questions. How do I query and display data? How do I customize my access? You know, so that some people can see this view and some people can see that view. Don't know how to do that yet. Learning Nginx. Understand routing and location. How do things move from when I complete this task, it goes to that task. Those are all new for me. I haven't got a clue where to start, but I'm going to go through this whole cycle of find the keywords, ask the questions, break it, fix it, build it, and so on. So what I would do differently is I would find projects on GitHub, and I would learn from other people. I would check for the versions used in the training material before I choose to download my software. I would refer to documentation instead of just random blogs. So when I really can't understand something, why not read the documentation? That way you can see if somebody's blog is actually reflecting the documentation. I would find someone to help and be specific, and I would step away from the computer regularly. I solved more problems. Like I learned how to build a carousel the first time by walking my dog. Because I went away and I went, oh mate, I think there was something on that Dudley story thing, and I think I could use that, and I could look up this, and then suddenly it was clear to me. But I had to be outside walking the dog instead of sitting there doing it over and over and over again. So where to go from here? As I said, ask for help, solve, publish. What I'd also like to see is code hangouts. I'd like to see 30-day challenges. I did this. I took 30-day challenges, and I said, I'm going to, by the end of 30 days, I'm going to do this. And I did it. Kick off a project, even if it's hokey. Collaborate with friends. So I started What's Friendly Road, and practice together. So this is my journey. I will show you my landing page, and then I will we'll be ready for a break. So get me out of here. And I'm going to see if I just do this. And I'm going to try to see if I can get my Node app first. I'm watching for typos because I'm really bad at, that's another thing. Copy and paste. See if it's going to load. Oh, it is, good. So this is mucking around, and then I can sign in if I remember my password. And then I can pick one of my things, and I don't know if my database is working right now, but say I was working on a project and I wanted to invite a friend. See if it'll save. And yeah, sure. Let's see, I don't know if it's working. Yes, it did. It worked. The database is live. Okay, because it was under maintenance. So I used a sandbox database. So same thing. I have some journeys, and same sort of thing. So by me, learn Node.js and do a blog. And if there's some Google Docs, and maybe I want to pick a technology, etc. So you get the gist. I'm not going to go through each of them, but you get the gist. And then I did as well, my final thing to show you is I did a fully published site, and it's not on Node. So my quest right now, and if anybody can tell me the secret, it would be really appreciated because I'm going crazy, is to hook the two together. So I have two DigitalOcean droplets. One is running Node, and the other one's just a Apache. Well, it's on NGIX now, Nginx, and I cannot figure out how to make the button open the app. It's a simple thing. Somebody's going to tell me something, and I'm going to fall on my head because it's so simple. So I'll just show you the site, and then we will have a break, and then we'll go on to Kevin. Does that work? So this is my site. Hope it works. Come on, slow. Yes. So it's a one-page site on Bootstrap, which, thanks to all the templates out there, I have been playing with. So my two options were to put this on front of a node, make the node HTML page is this, but it breaks with all the video and everything like that. So I chose to keep them separate because I figure at least I can leave a site out while I'm breaking all of these back-end apps. So that's it. So that's my site. That's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. So we'll take a break. You guys want to stretch?
Are there any questions first?
Of course.
Or we'll do like maybe 5 minutes of questions, and then if there are any, and then we'll take a 10-minute break.
We got 12 minutes for questions. You're right.
Perfect. Any questions?
Any, please. I have lots of. No questions are dumb. As a matter of fact, I was also going to do a contest to see if we could have the 5 dumbest questions, and I bet you we could answer them. Ah.
One problem I've run is, like what tool do you figure out what error you're going to get in JavaScript before you actually
run the web page? Is there kind of way to do that?
Figure out the error before you run the error?
Like syntax error.
Oh, you could. I open up my console and I make the mistake. I do the thing all the time. So am I in Chrome? Let's see, View. I will make a mistake on purpose, and then I'll open the Java console, and I watch for it. Is that what you mean? Like I'll do. Come on, open. Open. Mine's on the right, or yours is on the right. But I will actually make changes and then watch it. So in the MEAN.js app, they actually have Ajax, so you can see your changes, and Grunt and whatnot makes it go right away. So you can be in your console, if you have 2 monitors, better, and just do your thing and watch it, and then watch it run. I should have added this to my list of lessons learned, because I don't think I would have gotten through a lot of things. I would be, and then it would say cannot find, or there'd be a 400 error, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot to load the page, or whatever.
So this Grunt compiles it? Or
yeah, it does it right away. So when you make the changes, it pushes it right into your server. You're welcome. Come on, there's got to be one more question. Yes? How long have I been doing this?
Yeah.
Probably 6 months at least, and with breaks here and there. But
Do you have a guesstimate on how much time you spend on it in total?
oh, in hours.
Like,
I would be embarrassed.
Okay.
Probably, I would say you're going to spend, if you want to do this, learn, like if you're serious and you want to quit your job and learn it, it's going to take you 6 months full time. I think that's fair. If you're going to do back
sounds
end.
pretty reasonable, yeah.
Okay, I don't feel dumb, because I thought maybe it took, maybe it took you guys a week or something.
4 years.
And Chrissy, I thought it took a day.
Anybody else?
No?
All right, we'll have
Thank
more
you.
questions later on.
Yeah, I'm around. And
Thanks
yeah,
again
thank
so
you.
much.
I'll get off this
and
and
we'll take a 10-minute break. I'm sorry
some
there
water?
isn't any beer.
yeah. Well, say hi to your neighbor.
And then Kevin will be on.
I can turn this off. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, you know what I could do during the break?
Yeah, I might actually
I'm
go to the
going
washroom
You
before
go
I
to
put that thing
the
on.
I'm gonna.
No.
That'd be embarrassing if it was on.
I was thinking about that too. I was like,
You guys, while I know you're not moving around too much. I'm gonna pop open the DigitalOcean site and actually create a droplet. You don't have to watch, but it's like an Amazon, but it's cheap. It's $5 a month instead of, it's like an Amazon Web Services. So you can build stuff in it. It's like a
do you
blank
maybe
server.
want to still keep the mic anyway?
Of course.
Just so that we have it on record, I guess.
That's great. Yes, you're a good reminder when I'm up here to forget. Okay, I'll just give you a blip of digital. Ocean, you guys, is not really hosting, but it's like I use it for hosting. Can you hear? I use it for hosting, but it's create a server, and basically you can build an app in it, and you can play, and you can do all sorts of VPN and whatever else, and it's really viable because it's only $5 a month, but it's also easy to create and destroy. So when I said I created things and then destroyed them, you literally do that right on your thing. So I'm going to see if I can remember my password because I'm not on my computer. And everything is now in password savers, which is good. Yes. I did learn. Should have put that on my lessons learned.
What do you do when you're on another machine? On mobile or something like that? I would know ahead of time that I was going to be on a machine.
Okay, success. So everybody, we're going to create a droplet here. I'm on my site or on my page, so I've logged in. So if you were to choose to use DigitalOcean, you would create a login. Can I blow? Yeah. Command. Oops, too much. How's that? Guys can see? So I'm going to do this right here in front of you. So you would have created a user account, which I already have. So I simply signed into my account, which has my credit cards and whatnot, just like signing into Amazon.ca for books. And I'm going to create a droplet. So hopefully, open. There we are. So we have a bunch of choices here. I'm cheap, so I'm going to go the smallest. I'm going to choose a host name. What shall I use? Let's do. Okay, and then I'm going to go down if I can. So these are the bigger sizes. Of course, I'm not going to choose them. I'm going to pick New York 3. That sounds good. I did try to pick San Francisco and learned that they're at capacity and they don't have VPN and all sorts of things. So if you wanted virtual private networking, you would set it up here. I'm not going to do that in this one. I'm going to choose an Ubuntu 64, but there's more. I want to show you the images. So on these tabs, there are different things. So what they are, this is basically the version of Linux. So Ubuntu is fine. Snapshots is if I was pulling another, if I wanted to destroy one and rebuild it on another one, I'd use that, basically my snapshots. And I have my destroyed and my backups. But I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to show you, what I wanted you to see is this. All of these are applications that can be automatically downloaded in 55 seconds.
Sorry, I mean to cut you off, but I think my laptop is running out of videos. Hang
on,
to hear about this. Somebody have a new Mac charger?
I think I do. Oh, no. No, I have the old one. Okay, so I'm going to pick the mean.
Thank you. Yeah, those Hangouts, like this usually lasts for 7 hours.
Going to add my SSH key, which I've already got. Oops. Who's that? Add this one. So it's exactly what it is. It's a cloud hosting virtual machine. It's exactly what it is. So I'm going to create the droplet. That's it. So I wait, and it's going to give me 60 seconds remaining, 58 seconds. Usually takes around, I've never had it go beyond 50 seconds, but I understand it can get up to a minute. And it's creating the server in New York. So when it's done, I will get a IP address, and I can go onto my FTP, and I can look at the files, or I can go onto my terminal, and I can open it, and I can run it, and I can change HTML, and I can make my project start. So that's something that's worth knowing, that this is how easy it is. So it's coming. Yes?
What's the like behind using it on the virtual machine?
As opposed to
like a local.
So I can publish now. I can put a URL out, and I can make a website now.
Oh, so you actually.
You can see it. So I can create stuff. If I created something here, if I went in and started mucking with the files, I could give you and I could put a DNS. I could put a web page. Like I can go get a domain and I can add it to it, or I can just use my IP address and play around with it without having a domain. Yeah, and also things like PHP email and all that doesn't work until you're on a server. So there's a lot of things, and it's also bigger. You can put, instead of everything on your laptop. So I think we're done. This is it. So we now have an IP address, and there I can start playing with that if I want to. And that's what it looks like. Okay.
I'm glad to actually see that for the first time, because I'm wanting to try it. But it's worth mentioning to actually that there are specific like node hosts as well. So you don't have to run your own server, but it's really helpful and like quick to get this up and running. But if you only want to host a node project, you can also go onto Heroku or Modulus, and they're more expensive. They're actually significantly more expensive, but they take all that configuration stuff off of you. So you just put up your JavaScript file and it'll run it for you. So.
So if you compared this to GoDaddy or Bluehost
co-host or whoever else you choose, you get basically a cPanel and you get a message that says, "You're ready to load your sites. Simply put them in this public directory." Well, all those directories to configure it, but it's good to know.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Laurie.
By that, you're probably ready now, Kevin. Because everybody is really wandering. Do you guys want a break? What are your thoughts? Okay, go pee.
Do 5 minutes.
Yeah. Stretch.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And
Awesome presentation, Laurie.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I took some notes on it.
Do you want to turn it off then?
Oh yeah, sure.
Nice.
Test, test.
From smart technologies
To
metal.
yeah, to metal.
Everything goes to metal.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I probably should figure out how to do this. What do I do here? There was an error loading my app. Do I have to just reload this? I'm reloading.
You were still in there. I don't know what happened.
I'm reloading. Okay.
So yeah.
Shows the slide.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Join.
No, there you are.
And I forget how to share.
It's on the
Down below.
this
Sorry.
under the chat. Let's continue on. Kevin and Laurie actually work together quite a bit with lessons learned, and
Whoopsie.
Kevin is going to pick it up. He's been speaking here before about ES6 and functional reactive programming, which sounds really complicated and is, but it's also pretty cool. And today he's going to talk about the lessons learned that Laurie brought up. And I think I'm going to let you explain it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So, thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Thanks, David, for the intro. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try not to run long like I did last time. Laurie, maybe if you could give me your timer, if you have a chance. So this talk, Laurie's talk went very broad, talking about her experiences trying to kind of bootstrap from like zero knowledge to like an interactive website in 6 months, and I'm just amazed at like how much stuff she's learned in a short time. I've been programming for a very long time. I've accumulated a lot of knowledge, but it's been over like years. Yeah. So David just made a comment that like a percentage of what I've learned is obsolete. And that actually ties in with a point I was going to make in the presentation. I'll make it right now so I don't forget, which is that technology moves forward, right? And things are changing constantly. A lot of times people figure out easier ways to do things. They build new technologies, new programming languages, new frameworks, right? And I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and so I've always found myself like learning new stuff to kind of stay kind of at the front end of technology. And you know, that might seem like, well, oh, I have to learn something new like every 6 months, every year, or whatever. But the thing is that those new things actually make your job easier as a developer. So you put a little bit of effort in, but you get good returns, not only in terms of like personal productivity, but if you ever want to change jobs and work somewhere else for a different company, keeping your skill set current is a good idea. Okay, so this talk, I call it Fearless JavaScript. I don't even know if that's a good name for it, but the idea is going to be, I want to share with you some techniques that I found useful in learning JavaScript. I didn't always know JavaScript. I actually only picked it up maybe 3 years ago. Before that, I learned a lot of different languages like C++ and C and Python and Java and all sorts of things. The thing, though, about some of these tips and tricks is they can also be applied to learning other languages, and knowing more than just JavaScript can actually come in quite handy, even in web development, because there's lots of server-side stuff that, although you can use Node, there's also some other really nice libraries using other languages. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so the agenda for today, I'm going to talk about JavaScript language, and the focus is going to be primarily on JavaScript language. Laurie talked about a lot of things that you can use with JavaScript, but the focus is going to be on JavaScript. I'll talk a little bit about tools that I found particularly useful. Then we'll talk a little bit about interacting with the community and kind of how to break in to kind of GitHub and stuff like that. I'll talk a little bit about APIs and libraries, not just to make you aware of some of those libraries out there, to make you aware of some APIs, and those can potentially be starting points for projects. And then some final words of wisdom and questions. Okay, so JavaScript. So I want to start off by kind of talking about different layers, right? And maybe I should have had this list inverted, but kind of the base layer of JavaScript is the language itself. So those are things like keywords like if, for, var, function, the operators. It's kind of like the core, right? You can use those without kind of including any other libraries. You can also use the standard library too without including anything extra. And I like to think of like the standard library. It's kind of a collection of objects and functions, and you can kind of think of the language as being like in English we have certain rules in terms of like how a sentence is structured, but then we have a whole pile of words that are in the dictionary, and I think of like the standard library as being kind of the dictionary. And then the DOM is a set of words, a set of functions that you use to interact with the browser itself. If you're using Node, then you don't have those words, those functions. And then there's all sorts of third-party libraries like jQuery, AngularJS, tons of other ones. And the reason why I want to kind of like separate these layers in your mind is when you're learning something new, JavaScript, and you're reading tutorials, they might actually be touching on kind of different parts like all throughout these different layers. And I think at least at the start it's probably good to really focus on kind of the language and really get a good grasp on that, and then standard library, and kind of work your way out.
That was actually I was going to say too, because the web talks a lot about libraries. So it talks about the last level a lot, so you read up on all your keywords, and every single keyword is a library. It's not something that's below the layer, because operators, standard libraries, and stuff like that is pretty boring. But if you know that, you will be able to pick up any other library so much easier just by knowing the basics, and that's always been very important to me too. That's also why we're not too much talking about specific, or try to not talk too much about specific libraries, but more about the basics, because if you know what a build tool is and what it's supposed to do, it doesn't matter if you're learning grunt or gulp or whatever, and you don't have to listen to all those noisy arguments on the internet. So yeah, I think that's really important, and that's, even though it sounds really boring, is also like the most important thing to actually learning something versus like just, there are a lot of keywords, but with the basics, I think it's a lot easier to pick them all out and know what they're dealing with.
Another point to that, like libraries change over time, right? And as long as you have a really good grasp of like these first two layers, that knowledge will continue to be useful as libraries change, and even as JavaScript changes. Those keywords for ES5 will continue to be there for the next version. Okay, so I'm missing a slide here. I was going to explain why it was important, but we talked a little bit about that already. Here is a list, and just so you know, these slides are online, so we'll be sending out a link to these slides so you don't have to madly write down this list. This list isn't the whole language, but it's things that I think are important for people to know, either from this is something that may trip you up as you're programming, or it's something that is maybe super useful. So I am going to be going through some examples for this and Clojure, and also the prototype chain. Function scope is, anyways. I guess the point I want to make here is I'm not going to delve into all of these things, but I'm going to show you kind of things that I did when I was learning about this stuff that helped me kind of internalize these concepts better. So there's lots of documentation online, and I have some links for these things, right? So I'm going to look at some of those links and kind of walk you through my thought process. So one of those resources is JavaScript, the good parts. So this guy in the corner there is Douglas Crockford. He's kind of, I don't know, an important figure in the JavaScript community. Yeah, he's written a tool called JSLint, which does do some automatic syntax checking. I think you were asking about that. JSLint, there's a couple of versions. There's JSHint, which does a similar thing, and ESLint, and there are different flavors of linters, which are basically static type checkers. They'll look for common mistakes and point them out to you. And he also developed JSON. So those are his two claims to fame. This video, I'm not going to play it for you. You can play it at your leisure. It's a little bit old. It's from 2009. So some of the things have kind of moved on in terms of the language. The language is evolving and getting better. Okay, so some other resources. The JavaScript Garden. I'm actually going to, I think I'll open that link up. I found this site to be very useful. Let me see if I can show the menu. Oh, it's doing hide menu. It covers a lot of kind of the basic topics about objects and prototypes and this, and I found it useful. It provides some good examples. Often when I'm, looking at these kind of examples, I might actually pop open my console here, and I might actually start typing like, oh, function foo. And when you're typing stuff into the console, if you want to get multiple lines, you can just do Shift-Enter. And this is actually one of the things that I really like about JavaScript as a language is it's interpreted, so I can interact with it. I don't have to type all my code and then hit load in the browser and wait for stuff to break. I can kind of interact with it right now. I'm not going to type out this whole example, but some things I might do, I might say, oh, okay, foo equals new foo. Okay, so it's creating this object, and then if I do foo dot, oh, it's giving me these list of things, and one of them is value, so I'll see what's in there. So the dev tools and the console in particular is really handy for kind of exploring the language. Some of the kind of built-in objects I had on a previous slide, I might look at, oh, well, what's in math? Oh, there's all these functions, and some of these things are, well, what's pi? Okay, it's a constant. And function dot prototype has all these weird things in it. So one thing I would encourage all of you to do is explore a little bit. I'm going to show some more concrete examples of exploration. Another good resource is JavaScript on MDN. So MDN is Mozilla Developer Network. So Mozilla, they make Firefox. No, W3 schools. And then JavaScript, the weird parts, is actually linked to a talk that was given here a while back. I forget. Oh.
Search for Google for the title. There's a blog post for people for reading.
Okay, so you can also Google for a blog post if you prefer reading. Okay, so how to make it stick. Some of this might be a little bit repetitive, but don't just read it. For me, like I find that it's actually really helpful to try it out as you're reading it. If there's something that you forget, like a concept, like maybe you forget like what the value of this this keyword is in certain circumstances, see if you can make a little example to show yourself kind of what it is. The benefits I see there are kind of twofold. You don't have to waste time like searching for an article and like trying to find that information online. Oftentimes it's just easier to like type stuff into the console, and it just you kind of continue to practice writing code. So that brings me to the third one: write code. The more code you write, like the more comfortable you'll get with writing code. Practice makes perfect. Read other people's code. So later on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about GitHub and like how to go about doing that and modify other people's code. Because everybody has like a different coding style, and it might be like just simple things like where they put parentheses, or whether what kind of style they use for creating classes. Do they use extend, or do they just use prototype? And it just kind of broadens what you're used to in terms of like JavaScript. Okay, so REPL is just a word that you'll often see that refers to kind of this interface where you can type stuff and execute it right away, right? So I was showing that in the console in the browser. So you can use it to validate your understanding. You can explore objects with it. So oftentimes, like when I'm working on a project and I want to understand what's going on in a certain part of the code, I'll put a breakpoint in the debugger, and it stops executing right there, and I can actually interactively, type an object's name and see what values are in it. I think I have some links to how to use the debugger. I'm not going to go through the debugger today because like that's a whole talk in and of itself. There's lots to that. And just in general, like experiment with stuff. That's kind of the cool thing about JavaScript is you can kind of do anything with it. You can change objects and yeah. Okay, so just a couple tips in the console. The second one we looked at already about hitting Shift-Enter. Usually when you're typing code, you'll do var a equals blah, blah, blah. But I found that in the console, if you do var a, it actually doesn't do anything. So just to kind of show a demo of that. So if I do var a equals 5 and then I go a, oh, okay, see, just disregard that. I've had some issues in the past, and I think it was when I was like stopped on a breakpoint somewhere. If it does happen to you, just use a equals. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so one of the big things that people get confused about with JavaScript is how this works. So I'm going to see if I can open this link up. Yeah, I'm going to go with this one. So I'm not going to read through this all. Did it move? Okay, here we go. Okay, so it's talking about this. And what I want to show with this brief little example is that this can have different values depending on where it is in your code. So if I'm just kind of in this global context here, I'm not inside of a function, I'm not inside of an object, and I hit this, it says this is window. Okay, so I'm going to create a small function here, function foo, and this function is going to write out the value of this. Okay, so now if I call foo, if I just call foo like that, this is window. Now, if I create an object here, test equals, and here I'm going to give it a property called foo, which is that function I just created. Now, if I go test.foo, it's printing out this, but what this is, the value of this, has changed. So in this case, this is actually the object. And I mean, I could verify that maybe a little bit better by saying, test.name equals object1. And then if I did test.foo again, you would see, oh, okay, this is actually that object. Okay, so they have some other examples here. Okay, what happens when I call new foo? Okay, so it's printing out this, and this actually happens to be an instance of foo. So just to make it a little clearer, I'm going to say new foo. Okay, so obj, it's that instance. So here I've kind of shown that this can have many different values depending on how it's being called. So we looked at calling it with a constructor, calling it with an object. There's also some ways that you can actually explicitly set the value of this. So I'm going to I'm just going to override what foo is. I'm going to make a quick function that just does a couple things. It's going to print out what this is. Okay, so it's going to print out this, and then it's going to add these two numbers together. Plus y equal. Okay. Okay, so now if we say foo 4, 5, it's printing out window again because I'm just calling that function without it being bound to an object, and I'm not calling it with new. And it's actually taken those two numbers, 4 and 5, and added them. These two functions, apply and call, are very kind of useful functions for changing the value of this. So sometimes you may get into a situation where you want this to be a particular thing. This happens a lot when you're using callbacks. You need to pass a function to another function, and that other function will call that callback at some point in the future. But you want this to be the right thing. So a couple ways to do that is, one of them is bind. Let me show you bind first, and then we'll look at apply and call. So if I go foo.bind, actually I'm just going to make an object here. We'll just call it. Okay. So now if I go so I've created this new function f that is bound to the object. So if I go f4, 5, it's going to do the same arithmetic it did before, adding 4 and 5, but you'll notice what it printed out for this is actually that object that I created with the name object1. Now, apply and call are actually ways that you can call the function immediately. So in this case, I created a new function, and then I had to call it. But sometimes you want to just call the function immediately with a different value of this. So if I do foo call object1 4, 5, it's going to do pretty much what we saw before, but I didn't have to create a new function. And the reason why I'm showing all these examples here is, some of this might not sink in right away, but what I want you to get out of this is more of the technique that I'm showing here. As I'm, reading through the documentation, I'm trying some different things that they showed in the documentation. And I'm also trying some other ways of kind of combining, those functions or those keywords that they're showing, right? So I guess two things, when you're working through documentation, try, first exactly what they show you in the docs, but then also, try to push yourself a little bit past the docs, experiment, see other ways in which stuff can be connected. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that one. Okay, so one thing I do want to point out before moving on is that with some of the documentation you may find, or some of the blog posts, like there was this one that was posted on Hacker News a while back where this guy was talking about all the different ways in which this can change, right? And he actually had like a blog post that was, I don't know, many, many pages. I had to do lots of scrolling right through it. But the thing is that sometimes you can actually come up with like a simpler mental model. And so, when it comes to thinking about this, there's really kind of two ways to think about, the value of this. A function is either bound in the sense that it has like an actual object that it's using for this, or it's unbound, in which case it's just going to use window. So I'm not going to belabor this slide too much, but as you're kind of experimenting, you may want to come back to this one and try coming up with some examples for call and apply and bind and all of those things. Oh, one little minor thing to note is that if you're doing this in Node, instead of seeing window, you'll be seeing some global object. I think it's called self or something. Okay, so we looked at the bind, call, apply. Okay, another one that kind of trips people up is closures. Especially if you have experience with other programming languages. A lot of programming languages are actually adopting the idea of closures. But this example here is something that when I used to do interviews, I would give as kind of a question to developers who, we were looking for JavaScript developers. And I wanted to make sure that whoever we hired kind of understood this concept. So this example, it goes through a loop, and really in the example I should have had like button brackets I, because I actually had 5 buttons on the screen, but the question was around, okay, there's these 5 different buttons on the screen, and I have all these different on-click handlers. What should the value be when you click on like the first button or second button or third button? And the thing is that you have to realize about this example is that these event handlers are defined as the loop is happening, but they're actually only activated after the loop has finished running. Right, so at the end of the loop, what's the value of I? Anybody? 5, yeah. So all of these click handlers actually do exactly the same thing. They're going to print out I'm button number 5, which I ask people like to actually fix the program so it prints out button 1, button 2, button 3. Okay, so here is actually the solution to the problem. So I create this small helper function which can be used to, sorry, I messed up on this example big time. Yeah, sorry. So this is actually the same thing. What I meant to do is create a function that actually returns a function. I'm going to fix this slide so that people can see like the actual solution. But this is something to be aware of, when you're programming. Sometimes something's not working. It might be because you have a variable that has a different value than what you expected because of when things are actually being evaluated versus when they're being defined. Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, so next thing to explore. Sorry, let me just skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to skip over this example because this is actually kind of something that you should avoid doing if possible, which is adding methods to built-in built-in objects. So I'm going to skip that one. Also because I'm running a little bit low on time. But the next example is going to be quite similar. I just want to kind of highlight that JavaScript is actually quite kind of flexible in that, existing functions that, might occur on like elements in the DOM, or, even stuff like the array object, you can change how those things work. So where this comes in handy is it happens where you might want to test a little chunk of your code, and then the rest of your code you want it to kind of pretend like it's not doing anything. Okay, so adding an event listener. So the reason why you might want to instrument add event listener is sometimes you're using libraries which, like jQuery, which add event listeners for you. And you may want to find out when those event listeners are actually being added to your code. So what I'm going to do here is show how we can change event listener to actually let us know when it's being called, and then we'll let it call the original one. So I'm going to start off by storing the original implementation. Okay, so I'm just storing it in a variable there. And then right now I'm defining this new method on element prototype. So all elements on the page, if I add an event listener to any of them, this new code will get triggered. But you could actually make it much more narrow in scope. You could define it on just a particular object if you were interested in that. So the different parameters here I know because I've looked them up in the documentation, and I've also used this function before. Sorry, I forgot to hit Shift-Enter. So all my function is going to do is it's going to print out a statement. In Chrome, there's this nice little %O placeholder, which will actually print out an object as opposed to just square brackets object, and then you can't inspect the object afterwards. So that's kind of handy. And then I'm just going to call the original function. Notice that I'm using .call because I actually want, I've stored this function over here, but this function isn't bound to anything, so I need to make sure that I'm using the correct this. If I didn't do that, if I just called it without using call, this would be window. Okay, so type, handler, counter. Okay, so I've redefined the function, and just to show that it's working, I'm going to select something here. Okay, so, sorry. I think this is a code thing. Let me just check that. Yeah, so I have this one. There we go. I don't think this is actually jQuery though. That's okay. It's a little messy. Okay. So what I want you to pay attention to here is that when I added that event listener, it actually triggered that message that I had up here. So this is something that you may want to actually, like if you're having problems debugging things, put that before any of your jQuery code, and then if any of your code, framework code or jQuery or whatever, adds an event listener, you can be notified of it. I mean, beyond this specific example, though, I just want you to take away the fact that JavaScript is very malleable, right? And you can kind of customize its existing behavior to suit your needs. Okay, tooling. So the rest of the presentation is that's kind of it for the JavaScript examples. This next part I'm going to look at kind of specific tools that I use that you may want to kind of investigate. Let me make this a bit bigger. So kind of the first set of tools you may want to use is some kind of IDE or editor for editing your code. I use WebStorm. I'm going to talk a little bit about what to look for in an IDE in a second. There's another kind of set of tools called dependency management or package managers. You don't want to be writing everything from scratch. At the same time, you don't want to be, going to specific sites and downloading like individual pieces of code and adding them to your project. The reason for that is that kind of twofold. With dependency management, if there's any kind of shared dependency between two pieces of code, you won't have to include that twice. And it also helps with keeping all the versions straight. And if you need to upgrade or get a particular version, it helps with that. Another thing to kind of tool is some kind of module loading system. With the browser, usually people use require.js. Nowadays, though, people are switching to use Node modules, but to use things like Browserify or Webpack to kind of package them together. And then, so that brings me to the next one, which is build systems. So Laurie talked about Grunt. There's Gulp. There's Browserify, Webpack. There's a lot of different ones out there, and I would encourage you to, evaluate each of them a little bit. One thing that I found useful, like if there's kind of multiple competing technologies, and I'm like, I don't know which one to use, I'll often type in something like Gulp versus Grunt, into Google, and then often there will be like a couple blog posts where people have already gone to the trouble of comparing them. And I usually read one or two to kind of get a sense of like kind of the pros and cons of each system. And then lastly, there's browser dev tools. So I showed you a little bit of the dev tools already with the console, but there's also debugging and profiling. So debugging is helpful, like if you're trying to find out where a bug is, you can set breakpoints which will stop at a particular location in your code, and then you can kind of see what's going on there. Profiling allows you to take measurements so you can know which parts of your code are running fast, which parts are running slow. Okay, so some things that I look for in an editor: easy navigation. I really like collapsible regions. The reason for that is when I'm looking at a new piece of code, I want to see what are kind of the main functions, and let me just show you on WebStorm here. So this is, let me make that a bit bigger. Okay, so when you start looking at a source file and it's really long, it's like, well, I don't really know where to begin. It's just like, this one is 1,600 lines long, right? And so I'll start by collapsing everything and then kind of drilling down into, oh, okay, so there's this class object here which has a couple of methods on it. Okay, and then there's this backbone view which has, some different properties on it, and then it has all these methods here which do different things. And I might, drill down into each of these to kind of get a better sense. If there's also, one particular method I'm interested in, and I don't kind of know what's calling it or how kind of the execution path to it is, I'll open the project in the browser and I'll set a breakpoint inside of that function and then just use the application, right? And see when does that breakpoint actually get hit. And then that gives me, starts getting me thinking about like, oh, okay, so this function is used when I'm doing this action in the application. Oh, that's not the right one. That's weird. Where did my presentation go? Oh, there we go. Yeah, I don't know why it wasn't changing. Some editors will support automatic refactoring, so extracting a method or introducing a variable, stuff like that. You just select the code, select the refactoring, and it will do some of that automatically for you. Multiple cursors is awesome. For the longest time, and I was doing this for years, when I was doing like C and C++, is I'd have like, I'd be doing some operation on a list of different things, and I'd have to change all of like the variables or all the numbers, and I'd like put my cursor at the top and go like delete number down, delete number down, delete number down, and it was like really lame. So the nice thing about multiple cursors is you can select like a certain location in a line, and I should demo that too. Okay, so maybe I want to put something at the beginning here, right? So I've put my cursor at the front of each of those lines. I've typed something. I've saved myself some time. Okay. And then keyboard shortcuts. So just in general, if there's a way to do something with the keyboard, it's often faster than like fiddling with the mouse to find the right folder where your file is. On WebStorm, it's Command-Shift-N, and then you just type in the file name, and you got it right away. So, one of the things that I found is, in terms of like feeling like I'm more productive, is even just these simple things that, I'm not learning anything necessarily new about programming by using this editor and using all of its tools, but I'm getting more done in less time. Oh, so JetBrains, the guys who make WebStorm, they have videos that they post, like tutorials, like how to use their product better. There's also like Command-Shift-A, and then you can type the name of what you think the command is, and then it'll show you. You can also just Google for it, and it all depends on what IDE you're using. Again, like Laurie said, Google is your friend. Okay, So this slide here provides some things that you might want to do as you're developing, which Laurie was talking about rebuilding her droplets. I don't know if you can use droplets, source control on droplets, but source control, if you aren't using it, you absolutely should. So for those who don't know, source control is a tool that allows you to save your whole project at different revisions. And the nice thing about this is that, as you're making a big change, something may go wrong and you just, for whatever reason, the project is just in a broken state, right? And especially like if you don't have automated tests, you may be changing something over in one area, and you've accidentally broken something over here, but you haven't been testing for everything as you're working. You're just testing kind of the thing that you're working on. And by using source control, if you're taking regular snapshots every once in a while, if you do realize like, oh yeah, I've broken something over here, you can always wind back in time. The other thing that I mentioned there was about writing tests. So automated tests are a way that you can specify what your code should do, right? Given certain outputs, certain inputs, you should get these outputs. And by writing the tests and having these tests run automatically, you can develop with confidence, right? You don't have to worry that, oh, like if I make this change here, is it going to affect other things? You will be notified if you make a change that breaks something else. It's weird. Like I've been programming for a very long time, like since I was in elementary, and even at university, like all of the courses I took, none of them, taught writing tests, which is just weird. And it was only when I started working in industry at Smart that they were focused on tests. Now, not every company is focused on tests, but it's something you should really, it's a skill that you should think about building, because even if the company doesn't care about tests, like it's a way that you can develop with confidence, and it's kind of like a safety net, right? And that's the same thing with the source control. It's a safety net. And beyond just source control, like there's kind of these online repositories like GitHub and Bitbucket. And by putting your code in the cloud, right, if something happens to your computer, you spill coffee on it, like, yeah, you're out $1,000 or whatever, but you haven't lost all that hard work, right? It's like it's in the cloud. You go buy another computer, or you borrow your friends, and like all your code is right there. And I talked about the JS lint before, so I'm not going to belabor that. And I'm out of time. Okay, so here's some debugging links. I talked a little bit about that already. Okay, so can I keep going? Is that cool? 5 more minutes, okay. So some things to do on GitHub: report bugs, verify bugs, suggest features. So there's lots of projects on GitHub. You may actually be using some of them in your code, in your projects, and you find bugs, report them. There's some simple stuff you can start with in terms of like actually making changes. So fixing documentation, fixing bugs, and then adding new features is kind of like an even bigger thing. I'll skip that one. A couple things just about like finding projects. I put a couple links here of like this first one is my first pull request. I'm going to show this one because it's very small. I just want to kind of emphasize to people that you don't have to do a lot. So in this this library, glsl.js, pardon me, is just a way to render stuff using OpenGL. And so I just added this one parameter so there's not actually a lot of code changes here. I think there's maybe 6 or 7 lines. And the guy who maintains this project looked at that and he said, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and merged it in. And I was so happy, like I was jumping around when I got my first merge. Okay. In terms of starting a project, this link here is kind of cool. So this woman wanted to start learning to program, and she just started off by creating like these super simple projects, 1 a day. So, right, like it's very simple, like not a lot of interaction at the start. You know, and then as she progressed over time, the projects got a little bit more interesting. So this one, it hides the mouse cursor. It replaces it with this other kind of mouse thing. As I move my mouse up towards the top, it like gets smaller. So there's lots of like different things that she would have had to learn to do this. But again, it's like a pretty simple project. And I think, you know, beyond just like what these projects are, whoopsie, it's just the fact that she made a commitment to do something each day. Maybe it wasn't a lot, but you know, seeing like that she was working on this for 6 months straight shows commitment, and that's something I've tried to do with my GitHub too. Like I had a streak of 130 days, you know, and the thing about GitHub, you know, just beyond like being able to store stuff and share with people, is employers also look at that as kind of a portfolio too. Yeah, like I've put some really small stuff on. So for instance, like one of the projects I have, it's called Poster, and it makes this API post message look like an event emitter. It's maybe a couple hundred lines of code. Like it's nothing big, but it's just something that was useful for something else I was doing. Okay, finishing a project. So these are things you might want to do, like to polish things off a bit. GH pages is a really nice way to kind of like host the projects you're working on, so other people can view them. It's free. It's just static hosting. So if you need a web server or something, or a database, then you're out of luck for that. But okay, so there's some lists of APIs here. The reason why I put that list together is it's just things that you might look at and think like, oh yeah, I could do like an animation, or I could make an interactive, you know, game with that particular API. And when I was first starting like HTML and JavaScript, this dive into HTML5 was a pretty awesome website. One thing to be careful of, you know, when looking at all these APIs is, can you actually use them with all of the browsers that you're targeting? So there's this site, Can I Use, which I'm actually going to show. And you just type in whatever API you want to use with it, and you know, Flexbox, well, if you're targeting IE9, then you're probably out of luck. And it works for a lot of things. So WebGL, it just shows all the different versions. I always check before I start using something. And under resources, they might actually have links to polyfills for whatever browser. So in this case, there is a polyfill for IE. Okay. Those are just some libraries people might be interested in. You know, if you're interested in WebGL, there's an easier way to do that. Same thing with WebSockets, web components. Okay, final words of wisdom. I'm super overtime again, sorry. Watch this video. I can't say enough good things about it. She doesn't talk about how to program JavaScript, really. It's kind of like the talk I gave, but with a different focus. So she talks a lot about like kind of overcoming fears and you know, some things you can do, like I talked about, you know, GitHub and the community, but she also has some other kind of good advice there. And that's it. Questions? Yes?
You find companies work more like they allow, like you find you do GitHub like actually after. After you work a whole day, you don't want to still go on GitHub.
It depends. So there are some companies that do open source stuff and have it on GitHub, right? So Facebook has stuff on GitHub, Microsoft does. Other companies are very kind of a little paranoid about open source or hosting stuff in the cloud. In terms of the stuff that I've done on GitHub, all of it's been outside of work. A lot of it's been for a company called Khan Academy, which I'm trying to get a job there. But they do have a lot of their stuff on GitHub. You know, even if your company doesn't do GitHub stuff, I think it's still useful for, you know, you as a professional to have a presence on there, right? I found that more and more managers, when they go to interview people, they'll look at the resume, and if there's a GitHub thing, like they'll check that out. And the benefit there is that, you know, whoever is looking to hire you has a much better idea of like what you are capable of, right? And it also gives you an opportunity to really kind of, you know, tailor that, you know, what people are seeing of your work. That being said, I would strongly encourage you to put any and every project up there, and then just kind of highlight the projects that you're especially proud of.
Anything else?
Yeah, at the back.
So before you said you worked related to JavaScript, and I'm just wondering what things have you had to unlearn your other language? If some things are obsolete, you definitely carry some things through. Is there anything you had to unlearn?
Yeah, I mean, like some of the stuff around, like JavaScript uses functional scope, where most other languages use block scope, and so there's some subtle errors there that can come in. But to get around those, there's some simple rules, and then there's also like tools like JSLint which help enforce those rules, so you don't always have to be thinking of them. That's getting better with ES6 because you can use stuff like let, which is block scope, to declare variables block scope. I think that's probably been the biggest thing that I've had to like unlearn. A lot of this stuff that's different, that was different for me in JavaScript, like closures. Like I hadn't used any other languages that had closures before then, and so it was just something new that I was learning, but it wasn't strictly unlearning other stuff.
Cool. I think then we'll wrap it up for the day. I think next time we're gonna, well, it was 2 hours, that's probably okay. Yeah, thanks again for stopping by. This is all online. We're gonna post the links. Laurie's gonna send me the slides. You can put them just online too, right? Awesome. And yeah, thanks again to Kevin and Laurie. Thanks, Red Deer, for stopping by. You're more than welcome next month. And we'll be back next month.